So if you don't want to be killed by ISIS, don't go to Syria. If you don't want to be killed by a Mexican, I don't know what to tell you. Hey there YouTube, it's Patricia with through-these-eyes.com, and today's topic is just a little bit controversial. Okay, first let me start off by saying, soy mexicana-americana, nacida aquí en los Estados Unidos, vivo en California, y sí, tengo personas en mi familia que fueron inmigrantes ilegales. So I think I have just a little bit of credibility when I talk about this subject. Anyway, so last week, Ann Coulter gave kind of an interview, question and answer session promoting her new book on Jorge Ramos's America, or Jorge Ramos's America, in case you don't speak Spanish. So she raised a few eyebrows, and kind of interesting. Now, first off, I gotta say, she may not come off as the friendliest of person, maybe a little snobby, maybe a little hoity-toity, definitely rude. However, I love her. I love her, I love her, I love her. Because she's the only person that I know that isn't afraid to speak the truth. Now, whether you agree with her or not, that's up to you. But in my eyes, she speaks truth. Anyway, she has a new book out today, actually. Today's June 1st. She has a new book out called Adios, America, The Left's Plan to Turn Our Country into a Third World Hellhole. Yep. One of the first things that Jorge Ramos asked her about was whether or not she really believed that immigration was more of a threat than terrorism. Here's her answer.
You've said that Americans should fear immigrants more than ISIS.
Yes.
Most immigrants are not terrorists, not criminals.
I have a little tip
no
for
one, no one is biologically predisposed
if you
to
don't
commit
want
a
to be
crime.
killed by ISIS, don't go to Syria. If you don't want to be killed by a Mexican, there's nothing I can tell you. Very easy to avoid being killed by ISIS. Don't fly to Syria.
Are you really saying that we're talking about 40 million immigrants who live in this country?
I thought you were just disputing that.
No, 40 million immigrants who live, immigrants, I'm not talking about undocumented immigrants, overall immigrants legally here and those who are not here.
To 40 million with illegals.
So do you think that people are biologically predisposed to commit crimes?
No, I think there are cultures that are obviously deficient. And if they weren't deficient, you wouldn't be sitting in America interviewing me. I'd be sitting in Mexico. You fled that culture because there are a lot of problems with that culture. Hopefully it can be changed, but we can share our culture with other nations without bringing all of their people here. When you bring the people here, you bring those cultures here. That includes honor killings. It includes uncles raping their nieces. It includes dumping litter all over.
I read the whole book.
It includes not paying your taxes. It includes paying bribes to government officials. That isn't our culture. You can see the successful cultures in the world. They have been studied ad infinitum. America is it is the best in the world, and we are about to lose it, and everyone who lives here is going to lose that. And the people who are going to suffer the most are the weak ones. It's the women, it's the children. No country has ever had the sort of respect for women that Anglo-America does, and that is going out the door.
Now note that she makes a distinction between cultures, okay? There's the American culture, and then there are cultures from all over the world. And anytime you have immigration from another culture or from another country into ours, they naturally bring their own cultures. She brings up honor killings, and she brings up, bribery. Now, how many of you have heard that all you need to do is pay the Mexican cop so that you can get away with whatever it is you're doing? Okay, so there's some truth into what she's saying. And she's talking about what will naturally happen to a country if you have a variety of cultures that are coming in, keeping their culture. When I was going to school, we were told that America was a melting pot, and it's really no longer that way anymore. Liberals, people on the left, Democrats, push individual cultures. And that whole idea of becoming an American of embracing the American culture isn't really what's going on anymore.
I read the whole book, and I think you're afraid of 2044. In 2044, non-Hispanic whites will become a minority, and you don't want that.
Well, I do think the whole country will be changed when it becomes a
But what's wrong with diversity?
white country.
What's wrong?
It's not diversity.
So you don't want people like me. No, you don't want people like me here.
No, it's not diversity. It's Mexican. When 1/3 of all immigrants come from one country, that is not diversity. Before Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act, there was more diversity in immigration. Diversity should mean we take an equal number from all the countries in the world. I think that would be a stupid policy, but that would at least be diversity. Still talking. That's not what we're doing now. We are taking 30% of all legal immigrants from Mexico, 60% of all illegal immigrants from Mexico, instead of taking 5% or more from 7 different countries, which was the case before 1965.
European countries that you
we're taking them all from Mexico.
So your problem is with Mexicans, but not with Europeans.
No, and you said what's the matter with diversity? I'm telling you it's not diversity.
Now, I thought that was an astonishing statistic. 30% of all immigrants, legal immigrants, come from Mexico. 30%, 1/3. And as she mentioned, 60%. So more than half of illegal immigrants come from Mexico. That's amazing. Now, to me, since he's talking about, don't you want diversity? Well, yeah, diversity would be awesome if he really meant diversity. She mentions if we had, an equal number, 5%, 10%, whatever the percentage is, coming from an equal number of different countries. But, that's astounding to me. 30%, 1/3 of all immigrants, legal, come from Mexico. That to me is a little one-sided. You can't argue that. Okay, let's see what else she has to say.
And no, I didn't want to live in Mexico.
Facts. So
I don't want to live in Ireland. I don't want to live in Scotland. I wanted to live in America. Why don't liberals? Why do you think that the Mexicans who fled here want to recreate Mexico here? No, it helps your power because your media desirability goes up a lot. But you're not speaking for the immigrants who came here from Mexico. They left Mexico. They came
and
to
it's an economic situation. It's simply an economic situation. They come here because there are thousands of American companies who hire them, and because there are millions of Americans, including you, who benefit from their work.
It's more than economic because you have something like 2.4 trillion people in the world living on like $2 a year. They'd all like to come here. Mexico happens to be within walking distance. So you're the one who's discriminating against the poor Bangladeshis who would love to come here, but they can't walk across the border. Why should we discriminate against them?
So Jorge Ramos says that the reason why Mexicans come to the United States is purely financial, purely an economic reason, right? They come here because they need work and we employ them. And Ann is saying that it's not the only reason. And I believe that. If he believed what he was saying, that, for economic purposes, we should let the Hispanics in, let the Mexicans in because they just want to work, well, what is his response to the Bangladeshians who would like to come here who are only making, $2 a year? Why isn't he advocating for, more Ethiopians to come over or more, name a country? He's solely concerned with the Mexican population. And to me, that is racist.
So you're concerned about immigrants coming here. The number of foreign-born population, the percentage foreign-born population, 1900s it was 13.6%. In 1910, 14.7%. Right now, 13%. In other words, the percentage of the foreign-born population in this country hasn't changed. So you're crying wolf.
No, you didn't listen to my last answer. It isn't just the fact of immigration. It's the immigrants we're getting. It is also a fact that the immigrants before 1970 were more likely to grab...
So your concern Latinos are doing much better. Than the parents, of course.
So many people in politics today and in the media think that it's okay for people to come with other cultures and bring that culture here to America. And that is so not true. people, like she says, that come from other countries flee that culture. They don't just flee the country, but they leave that culture behind. To want to bring their culture here is crazy. They might as well just stay where they're at. They come here because this country represents something special and unique. My grandparents, when they came here from Mexico, wanted to fit in. They didn't want to keep their Mexican culture. They left it for a reason. He came here and made sure that his children spoke English. He made sure that they learned to read and write and do math, that we could keep traditions, our tradition of making tamales at Christmas. That is perfectly fine. But the culture of how you interact with people, how you treat people socially, is what is at the heart of being an American. It's what separates us from any other culture in the world.
We're not in an international humanitarian process here. American government should be protecting the American people, not helping out the people of the world. This isn't an international charity mission.
Well, that's a tradition in this country, and this is a country that was formed by immigrants, including your family and my family. We all came from another country.
I didn't come from another country.
Well, your family did.
No, it didn't.
Of course it did.
No, it didn't.
Of course it did.
There was no, it did not. My family came from America because there was no America until they came.
Okay, before your parents,
There's
they
a
came from
difference
somewhere.
if they taught American history,
That's
but
the one thing.
apparently they don't. The first people here back in the 1600s were not immigrants. They were settlers. They came to a society or a continent
They came
that
from another
had
country.
no country. They created this country. The Dutch, mostly the British, created America.
So they
were not immigrants.
So
Nor were the first 17 presidents.
your family came from
immigrants.
another
They were
country,
settlers.
so did mine.
No, they
So-
weren't. My relatives are
All right.
American.
Now that's really interesting to me. I hadn't really thought about it until she mentions this, and I don't think honestly that Jorge Ramos actually thought of it either. She makes the distinction between immigrants and settlers, and if you really think about it, it makes perfect sense. To say that you immigrate anywhere, right? If I'm going to immigrate to Canada, if I'm going to immigrate to Japan, there has to be a country to immigrate to. So the settlers, and what she's saying is that her family didn't immigrate here. Her family settled here. So she may not be Native American, and she's not claiming to be, but her family ancestry arrived here as the first settlers. And Jorge Ramos doesn't have a comeback to that, and really I think it may have caught him off guard, because if you really think about it, it's true. Now at this point in Jorge Ramos's show, he lets the audience participate, and they have some questions for her. So the first gentleman to ask Ann a question asked her when she realized that she was an American. He mentions this because he says that he first realized it when he said the Pledge of Allegiance in kindergarten, I believe. So she says she's always known she was an American, and then she poses a question back to him.
If you're proud of being an American, what would you think of the fact, as I have in my book, and I assume you guys haven't read my book yet, but I hope you will, what would you think of the fact that Carter judges started presiding over citizenship ceremonies conducted in Spanish?
Well, I speak both languages, so I'm good. I don't know about you.
So you don't care that,
No, I mean, I
that
can
American
speak both
citizenship,
languages.
okay.
But
Then I'll definitely call
the
you
reality is that my
Jeff.
mom was deported, and because she was deported, I ended up getting papers. So this is the messed up system that we have.
Okay, well, I'm thinking that we really want citizens who are speaking English and love the country with such an emotional intensity described by Justice Brandeis that you would react in horror at the fact that citizenship ceremonies are being conducted in foreign languages.
Thank you very much.
So I hadn't heard that they've started giving the citizenship test in other languages. It doesn't surprise me, sadly, but I do say sadly because I truly believe that you should know English. English is the majority language in this country. It is not the national language. We don't have a national language, which is why we can speak any language we want here. But it was founded by English-speaking settlers, and English is the majority language. So you should focus on learning English to become a citizen. My grandfather took his test in English, and he didn't speak much English at all when he came to this country. It took him some years to be able to take and pass that test, but he did it, and he was so proud when he became a U.S. citizen.
So do you think that children of undocumented immigrants should be denied in-state tuition because of someone else's illegal actions?
I gather you're saying that because, what about the children? It's not, look, anybody any parent breaking the law is going to be a problem for the child. Those Enron executives, their children have suffered horribly. Should we just say, oh no, we can't put the Enron executives in prison, those BP officials, if they have to pay those huge fines, their children will suffer, and it's not the children's fault. I'm sorry, when people break the law, there are consequences for the kids. It is whenever parents break the law. Oh well.
Now, can you really argue that? I mean, she has a point. You know, someone who's convicted of murder and goes to jail, what about their poor kids? We should let them go or they're going to be without parents, right? Well, okay, that's extreme. But she's making a point that the people that knowingly come here illegally, they know they are breaking the law. And if they're caught, they need to be prepared for the consequences. The consequences are deportation. If you have a family that comes here illegally and brought their 2-year-old and is now 7 or 10 and they're caught, I'm sorry. I totally agree with her. They got to go back.
So my first question is, can I give you a hug?
I wouldn't today. I'm recovering from the worst flu I've ever had.
It's okay. I'll take the germs. This undocumented immigrant who has lived in this nation for almost 22 years wants to, as a sign of my humanity and yours, recognize you and say, can I give you a hug?
No, let's get on with the question.
Okay. There is freedom of speech, and then there's also hate speech. And I wholeheartedly believe in our First Amendment right. But many of the things you say on TV, on the radio, in your books, not only do they incite fear, they also incite hate. And so I wanted to ask you if you feel you're abusing your First Amendment rights, and do you think legitimately that what you are saying is right?
Well, 2 points. One is you don't understand the Constitution if you say there's free speech, and then on the other hand, there's hate speech.
No, I know that under the law of the Constitution,
the question,
they're
and then you'll
both the
step
same,
away and we'll
hate
take the
speech
next
is
one.
hate speech, and you don't have the right.
And thank you all for coming here today. She's about to finish her speech. No, there is speech. There's not speech and hate speech. I don't engage in hate speech. I engage in speech. And yes, it's part of the long Anglo-Saxon tradition of thinking that free speech and the contest of ideas, the truth will emerge. It goes back to John Stuart Mill.
I think the people that are standing here will agree with me.
Of a place like America,
some of the things that you've been
change
saying and continue to
by
say
dumping
is spewing hate speech.
And we're back on my favorite topic, freedom of speech. Now, this woman tries to make a distinction between freedom of speech and hate speech, and Ann calls her on it, and she's 100% right. What she says, in her opinion, is truth and fact. Now, whether you choose to believe her, whether you completely want to dismiss her as just spewing lies, that is your right. Quick note, if you ask a question, you should be prepared for any answer. She was expecting her to say, sure, I'll give you a hug, but yeah, you got to be prepared for the no. Anyway, next question.
There's a lot of candidates, and here in Florida we have Senator Marco Rubio, for example. I like the senator. I was upset with him on his view on the whole immigration debacle, but thinking forward, could you see yourself supporting him in a general election? Have we not have another candidate, and why the dislike? I think that he's a great candidate, and we have, as a Cuban American, I think I'm so proud of having Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, people of Cuban blood, being able to get there.
Well, I'm going to keep bringing the questions back to my book, and again, I say this is not. Glad you're a conservative. Happy to have you here. Hope you vote Republican. But this blood thing, not really an American Anglo-Saxon tradition. This is a problem, and that's why the Democrats are insistent on dumping all of these very different cultures on America, because they can get people to vote on the basis of blood. That is not how Anglo-Saxons vote. Not at all. No, and we have third worlders voting in tribal ways. If we had gotten 71% of the Hispanic vote, Mitt Romney still would have lost. If he had gotten about 5% more of the white vote, he would have won. So Republicans better wake up and for the first time in, I don't know, my lifetime, appeal to white Americans for votes. No one says to a white person who votes Democrat, you voted against your race. But you do get that with all of the ethnic groups coming in. Once Democrats discovered the joys of racial politics, it was over.
Yeah, I think like the word Hispanic and Latino in itself, it serves like to divide instead of unite us as Americans. So thank you so much for being here, Ann.
Okay, so I found this segment really, really interesting. The issue of bloodlines. So this brings me back to the Democratic Party. The Democrats that are pushing open borders and amnesty, you have to ask yourself, why are they doing that? I believe that they believe that all of the minorities will vote Democrat. So they're trying to get a larger base. They don't really care about improving the minorities' status. They are looking for voters. And in having this amnesty, pretty much is trying to guarantee themselves 11 million new Democratic voters. And Ann is completely correct when she says that Anglo-Saxon white people don't vote based on race. Because if that were true, Obama would never have been elected. And as a Hispanic, I've never thought, well, gee, if I vote for a white guy, I'm voting against my race. If I vote for a black guy, Obama, I'm voting against my race. That's part of the American culture. That's what she's talking about. I am an American. I'm not a Mexican, where I'm looking at, I just want my kind. That's not the way to think about an election. You need to vote based on your principles, based on your ideas and your beliefs. And you need to vote for the candidate that embodies as many of those as possible. No one is perfect. No one is going to agree with you 100%. But this idea of, because Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are Cuban or Hispanic, I'm going to vote for them because they're like me. No, that's not necessarily true. If I vote for either of those, it would be because they hold the same type of beliefs and values that I do. The same way as I would vote for a Scott Walker because he embodies the same ideas and principles that I hold. The same way that if there were a Hispanic candidate on the Democratic side, I'm not going to say, I'm going to vote for that Mexican. No. If he has the values that are contrary to my beliefs, then he doesn't get my vote. Anyway, Ann is spot on that one.
And so do you think that if Republican candidates follow what you think, they're going to lose the Hispanic vote and they'll lose the White House again?
No, they will win when California had about the same demographics as America does now. I went through Ronald Reagan, who got the smallest percentage of the minority vote of any Republican between LBJ and Obama. And that was the biggest electoral landslide in history. The way for Republicans to win is to follow the Ronald Reagan model. This has been the most dramatic, historic ethnic change to any nation in world history. And this is without lying to the American people and without even consulting the American people on it, which is why I'm particularly enraged at the idea that I can see every night on MSNBC enthusiasm about, the browning of America, the browning of America. But if I say, I don't like what you've done, that's racist.
No, but don't you think it's better that this is a stronger, don't you think this is a stronger nation because it's more diverse, more tolerant?
It's not more diverse, it's more Mexican. We have taken in 1/4 of the entire Mexican population. At what point will we have taken in enough, in your view?
I think that
Half of
with
the
a legal
Mexican
system,
population? The entire Mexican population.
no, I think with a legal system, we wouldn't need, and we wouldn't be having hundreds of people dying crossing the border.
That isn't an answer to the question. 1/4 of the Mexican population. How much
Because
more do we have
it's
to
simply
take?
it's an economic situation.
When
As
will
long
you
as you have
achieve
people here
perfect diversity?
who need immigrants
not an
and
answer to the
workers,
question.
and as long as you have workers needing a job, they're going to be coming here.
Oh,
It's
no,
an
no,
economic
no.
it's an economic
They need workers who
situation.
are subsidized by the middle class.
Adios, America.
That deal.
Thank you so much for coming.
Fantastic book. Thank you for having
I
me.
really appreciate it. And thanks so much for joining us. And thanks to our studio audience. Adios America will be available in hardcover June 1st. And be sure to check our hashtag #AnsAmerica. More on America after the break.
Okay, so I've been putting a lot of blame on the Democratic Party. We know they want to increase their voting base to keep them in power. But the Republicans aren't innocent in this whole immigration scheme. Big business, big agriculture want the cheap labor. So they're not putting out as big of a resistance as they could or should. This, I do believe, is what is hurting America today, and what I think is the point of Ann's book. With 1/3 of immigrants, both legal and illegal, coming from one country, that will have a drastic change, a drastic impact on our society. We see it now in education, in healthcare, in our social programs, when it has become easy to say, oh, well, the children, they're not at fault. So, we've got to teach them because we don't want a society full of uneducated people. Well, the parents that you're letting in oftentimes are uneducated, so you're already welcoming that base. Their children are now a burden on our school system, where the ratio between teachers and students is incredible. Students aren't getting the attention that they need because they're focusing on teaching these other students English. Our healthcare system is absolutely crazy, and they can't afford their healthcare. So the middle class is now subsidizing that healthcare. We have social programs where you get food stamps or you get aid for families with dependent children. You have all of these monies going out that are being funded by the middle class that's getting hurt and squeezed because we can't afford programs for 11 to 30 million people that just have come in within the last 20 years. Anyway, so I think that's the point of Ann's book. If something isn't done about this problem, both by Democrats and Republicans, our country will change. I've already seen some of that happening. And I hope there's someone out there that has the courage to stand up, speak the truth, and do something about it. All right, I've gone on long enough. This video is way too long as it is. But anyway, I hope you liked it. Please like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. I know this is a crazy issue, but more people need to talk about it frankly and honestly. Don't be afraid to share your opinion. Thanks for watching.
That this is a stronger, don't you think this is a stronger nation because it's more diverse, more tolerant?
It's not more diverse, it's more Mexican.